Well, there's no doubt that giving your life to serve God can be a crazy adventure, often a little bit more exciting and challenging than we really understood when we said those heartfelt and somewhat innocent prayers, giving him permission to please use us in meaningful ways. My guest today, Helen Sworn, is a case in point, an extremely successful businesswoman in the UK. Her climb up the corporate ladder was arrested by a surprising conversation with her creator. Let's find out a little bit more. Thank you so much for coming.
You're welcome, Cheryl. It's great to be here.
I heard this story from you. I think I interviewed you 7 years ago when you were here in Toronto for a conference. And I was just so fascinated by your story because, you know, so many of us pray those prayers. You know, we love God. We want to make an impact on the world. We say, you know, use us for anything. Take us anywhere. And he does.
He does. It's frightening, isn't it?
It is. And I mean, you grew up kind of as a cultural Christian, but maybe it wasn't necessarily so much impacting your everyday life or that personal side of it. So what happened to change that?
Yeah, for sure. My aim was heading up the corporate ladder and kind of moving people out of the way so that I could get where I wanted to get. And God had other plans for me. And really kind of often, God has to start with us on our knees, right? And it's never a very comfortable place to be. And so challenged my entire faith that I had grown up with and really challenged me to take it to a new level. And so
you had hit kind of a problem, like your marriage wasn't going so
yeah,
well. Like,
for sure.
Like you had some challenges in your own life.
And I think that, that was really, I realized that my marriage had problems. I realized that I was becoming somebody that was really not such a nice person to be with after all. And I didn't think that I needed God anymore. I was moving up the corporate ladder myself. And yeah, God was the one who challenged my status quo. Like, really, where do I want to go with my marriage? Where do I want to go with my faith with him? And I think that those moments in life are the times that we question everything again. And really coming back to a new relationship with God, not as one that had grown up through that faith, but actually knowing that wasn't going to take me into my adulthood. I had to have a completely renewed relationship with God. And so I can remember sitting on a beach actually in the car and praying to God, well, maybe I can just run away and nobody will ever find me again. And I remember God saying to me, but I will track you to the ends of the earth.
Oh, darn.
and I'm like, wow, that's not fair. and realizing that, yeah, I needed to give my life over again. And in doing so, I felt myself, okay, everything has to change. I don't want to be a Sunday Christian anymore. I don't want to navigate God into this small part of my life. It has to be everything. And interestingly enough, my husband was on a similar journey and said, I actually feel like God is calling me into full-time ministry. And initially, I'm like, wow, do I need to be a part of that?
Yeah.
But you know, God was working in my life at the same time, and so I thought, who is my God in my life? My God is my job. The corporate sector became my God. So I can remember walking into work one day and I said, I'm resigning. Everybody around me was like, no way, you're joking, right? And I said, no. And they're like, why? Like, you're heading to the top. I said, because this is not what God wants for my life. Well, everybody laughed at me. They thought it was hilarious.
And you weren't going anywhere. It wasn't like I'm quitting to do this or that.
No.
You didn't know what your plan was.
I had no idea. I just knew that God said to me, you need to get rid of that idol. And so I can remember the kind of 6 weeks notice that I had to give at work. All these people that I had trampled on my way back up were then the ones that came back to me and said, okay, we're going to pay you back for that. And that was a really interesting lesson for me. And you know what, God, I can remember sitting in the bathroom. Like, it was a stressful environment. I was in a very stressful kind of hard-nosed working environment with mostly men. And so they thought, okay, she's fair game now. We're gonna take her down. And so I can remember reading these passages of scripture in the toilet, like, okay, God, you've got to be the one that's going to be with me in this. And then, a long story short, ended up in seminary. Knew that I didn't want to be a vicar's wife. And I was very clear with my husband on that.
I was trying to imagine.
Yeah.
You said, I'm going into ministry, you in the corporate world becoming a pastor's wife.
Yeah, those outfits don't suit me. So, you know.
And you can't play the piano, right?
I can't play the piano. You're right.
Which is kind of
and I'm not a good cook either. I can't make jam. So it was like, okay, God, where are you going to take us? And God started opening doors into Southeast Asia. And I had this shopping list with God. It's like, okay, I'll go somewhere that has not had civil war, has not got extreme poverty. And so I left.
Healthcare for your kids. Like, you were a young mom, right?
I was.
You were pregnant even during some of this time.
I was pregnant at this time with our second child. And I thought, you know, this is what I want. Well, we went to Cambodia. Actually, our daughter, when we first went, was 2 years old. And at that point, I thought, I never want to come back to Cambodia ever again. Went to Thailand, spent some time alone with God and arguing with God, as I quite often do. And God saying, this is it. I want you back in Cambodia. And I can remember saying, I want this in triplicate from you, God. If you want me to take my daughter out there, I want to be completely certain that this is where you need me.
Let's just say, like, the Cambodia of those days, that was what, 1999, is not the Cambodia of today. Like, there was literally gunfights still in the street.
Well, when we went, the first time was 1997, just before the coup. So there was gunfire like the whole time, and it was building up to the coup. So the stress there was intense. And our daughter contracted German measles over there. And to be honest, when I flew away from Cambodia, I'm like, whew, never going back there. Never going back there. And God, in his sense of humor. So I can remember I was sat in this actually Bible study with a whole load of burnt out missionaries in Thailand. And I'm thinking, well, if this doesn't put me off, nothing will. And I'm there arguing with God. And at that moment, I had an audible voice behind me saying, this is the way, and walk in it. And it's the only time I've ever had that experience. And I kind of went, oh, nobody there. Oh, wow. So as I went back to my room and looked up in Isaiah, whether you turn to the left or to the right, you will hear a voice behind you saying, this is the way, and walk in it. And that was my triplicate contract with God. Honestly, and I did a 360. I was like, this is where we're going. We went back to Cambodia, went back to the UK. 3 weeks later, the coup happened in Cambodia. Everybody's saying, well, of course, you're never going to go to Cambodia. It's like, absolutely we are. Cambodia has to be the place. So within a year, was pregnant with our son, and we went back to Cambodia in 1999 with a 4-year-old and a 5-month-old.
Mm. And I don't know if people can really understand the challenge of that with healthcare and a growing family. And then also you got involved in fighting trafficking, which is just a heartbreak, trauma-filled job.
It is. I had never anticipated that that was the journey that God was going to take me on. And I think, you know, sometimes it's like, oh God, if you just tell me what's going to happen, it'd be so much better. And I'm like, oh no. Just keep that to yourself, God. Just drip me little pieces of information, because I would have ran a mile if I knew truly what I was getting myself in for.
So you've been there 16 and a half years now. Just tell me this. So you did this crazy thing to follow God. Was it worth it?
Yeah, it was. Some mornings I wake up in more towards the despair piece than the hope piece. Some mornings I wake up more towards the hope and the despair. But faith is not whether you're at either end of the scale. It's about the continuum, hey? So having to redefine faith and what that looks like with a million questions, what that looks like with poverty on my doorstep every day, what that looks like with working in this issue, and all of the questions and all of the ambiguity around faith, and seeing that as an ongoing journey.
When I was younger, I used to think that if God calls you to do something, it's going to be beautiful and wonderful and easy. And I think life has shown me that that's not always the case, but there's still beauty and wonder and ease about it. You know what I mean?
Yes, yeah. And I know that part of the struggle is part of the faith, yeah? And so some days I'm screaming at God and asking him, why is this still happening? And knowing that actually my faith in God and God can wrestle with that with me. And it doesn't mean that I I have less of a faith when I have all of those questions. I think before I felt like I needed to have it all ordered and I needed to know what that looked like. And it's okay, I know my theology. Now I'm like, wow, even after having gone to seminary and working on the field for all of these years, I'm like, wow, my theology is being questioned and challenged all of the time. And what is my mainstay? My mainstay is that relationship with God when everything else kind of blows up around me.
So if someone's watching this interview and they either want to be used by God in a bigger way, or they're being challenged to do something so far outside their comfort zone to serve Him that doesn't make any sense, like going to Cambodia did for you, what would you say to them? What would be your best advice?
Yeah, hold on to that first dream that God gives you. Because knowing that that was the dream that God has implanted in your heart and in your soul is the only thing sometimes that will keep you there. And so when everything else doesn't make sense, you know, I know that even in those early days, and I was just desperate to go home to the UK, I would like count down every day that I knew it was going to be like we were there 3 years before we were allowed to go back. And I would sometimes count down how many days. Oh, only 848 days to go. Okay. But I knew that if I abandoned all and went back to the UK, I knew that I wouldn't be following that dream. And so that dream that God gave me in the beginning is the dream that I hold on to in the despair.
Well, you have made an incredible difference in Cambodia. We haven't had the time in this interview to even talk about all that you've done, but I know that God through you has left His stamp on the people and the place, and who knows what He's going to do in the days ahead. So thank you for being obedient to that. You're a great example, and thanks for coming.
You're welcome. Great to be here.
Yeah, well, if you've been watching this and maybe you're in a similar place, you know, you don't have adventure in your life, and you know that if you gave yourself over to God, He would take you on something you never dreamed. Or maybe you're being challenged to do something that makes absolutely no sense, like leaving a corporate job and going into the ministry. You know, I don't know what God's doing in your life, but I do know that He is a God of challenge and adventure. He challenges the things that we hold dear to our heart because He wants to do something great through us. If you are in that place and you want someone to talk to today, we have prayer lines 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. People who just want to listen to you and talk with you and walk you through your journey of faith, give them a call and let's start the adventure, because this world is waiting for people to step up and make a difference and be Jesus to them.